Well, hello there. What was I going to talk to you about today? Yeah, I was going to talk to you about, I guess, give you an update on CDs that I've put together this year. I've gotten to a point where I need to buy a new CD rack because I have too many CDs, but that's okay. My big thing this year was I got back into sort of like vinyl records, and I bought a vinyl record player with speakers from a Canadian company called Fluency, I believe is the name. And that's like the most expensive thing that I own because I think it was like $1,400 for the whole set. And I got back into collecting stuff on vinyl, but I did also sort of get back into collecting CDs to some extent because there was stuff that it was just easier to find on CD, and I've also found over the past few weeks as I've been learning to sort of like play stuff by ear, that CD is the far better format to do that with because it's a lot easier to skip back to the beginning of the song to then start your playthrough all over again. So some of the CDs that I have are actually kind of like duplicates of stuff that I have on vinyl, but that comes in handy for, things like traveling and whatever. It's easier to just take along with you. So this is my complete CD collection as of the end of 2025. And without further ado, let's get into it. So first off, I have Good Morning Vietnam, the soundtrack. This is one of my favorite soundtracks of all time because I just like the, garage rock and the, like surf rock and even like the Motown sort of selections that they picked for the soundtrack of this. It sort of encapsulates that time. I do have Nuggets, the Nuggets from Nuggets on vinyl, which is like the best of the Nuggets series, which sort of covers similar territory. But this is just a fantastic CD. I've always really enjoyed it. It has one of my favorite songs of all time on it, which is California Sun by the Rivieras, who are like 4 or 5 kids. There's probably more of them, to be honest with you, but like there's like 5 kids from Indiana who wrote like the greatest song about California ever. And yeah, it's just like great stuff on here. Nowhere to Run by Martha Reeves and the Vandellas is also on here, which is another one of my favorite songs of all time. And much like a Rolling Stone, it has that kind of like that little drum pause at the very beginning of it that, as I guess Bruce Springsteen would say, kicks open the door in your brain, to paraphrase loosely. But it's just got great stuff on here. Them is on here with Baby Please Don't Go. We got James Brown, we got Louis Armstrong, and then we got the Castaways' Liar Liar, which is also fantastic, and that shows up on Nuggets as well. So that's the first one. The one thing I do find annoying about this is the skits. While I really enjoy like Robin Williams' skits in general, I don't really like skits on albums because I find it kind of detracts from like the actual music that I'm trying to listen to. So like even like in hip hop and stuff like that, occasionally there's one that I'm like, yeah, that absolutely has to exist in there, but like I'm kind of happy that trend sort of fell off because I just want to listen to the music a lot of the time. I don't necessarily need the skits as well, but that's the first CD that I have here in my collection. Next up is AC/DC's High Voltage. This is a reissue that they did at some point in time, and what's fantastic about this is the liner notes, because they've included sort of their original handwritten lyrics with the chords above what they wrote down. So you can actually learn how to play the songs by reading through here, which I think is a fantastic feature of like these little collections. Like TNT is in here, and all the rest of it. This is how I've learned actually to play a lot of like AC/DC rhythm guitar is from these liner notes, which also kind of like helps you to just learn how to pick up a song by ear as well. So I thought this was a really great set. This is probably my favorite AC/DC album of all time. It's just very raw. It's very, bluesy and garagey and just like punky and all of the great things that you want. That I want. Sorry, I want in music. Not everybody else wants that, but yeah, just like them starting out and really getting into it, and you know, it's very dancey as well, which is great. So I really like that. I also have Let It Be Naked. This is the first version of this album that I ever heard in its entirety. I'd obviously heard like the Beatles beforehand, but mostly it was like as singles and stuff. And this was the version of the album that I first heard in its entirety, and this is my favorite version of the album. Because it just gets back to like the very like core fundamentals of what they were doing, and it doesn't have all that sort of like extraneous buildup in it. So I really like that. But also what's great about this is, again, if you read through the liner notes, you can actually learn how to play Two of Us through like the little transcripts of the Beatles talking to each other in studio that have been recorded in here. So that's pretty great. It also has a DVD. I think it has a DVD. Am I correct? Yeah, it has like a DVD that I guess covers some of the footage of them in the studio as well. But I don't have a DVD player because the TV that I have doesn't actually work. So I'm basically just like an internet and physical media person. I don't really mess with TV all that much anymore. But yeah, Let It Be Naked. This is my favorite version of the album. Just a fantastic piece of work right there. Next up are two CDs that came out of what was a sort of like a package set, but I guess technically are also sold separately a lot of the time. And these are my Johnny Cash CDs. I got these when I was like a teenager. This is how I learned how to get into like Johnny Cash. And so we have Walk the Line, which is 16 original recordings, including some rare alternate versions on here. And then there's also Original Outlaw. The liner notes of these are great because they have quotes by a lot of the people who he worked with or inspired along the way, and people who are also, you know, fans of his, which are great. And yeah, like just really interesting set, and it gives you a really good sort of overview of his, I want to say like earlier career up until maybe like the mid 60s even. And this is the Cash that I always sort of gravitate to when I think of Johnny Cash. I know a lot of people, I guess now, kind of gravitate towards more like the American recordings that he did with Rick Rubin, stuff like Hurt and all that. But yeah, for me, that's like the core. That's the core Cash, is going back to that. I do have Cash on vinyl as well, and I do have the Beatles on vinyl, but like I like having those as a backup and like alternate versions of stuff. Next up we have Stompin' Tom, 25 of the best of Stompin' Tom. Stompin' Tom's fantastic. I love this man as like a songwriter. I think he should, you know, in some ways be considered like a poet laureate of Canada, but I know a lot of people would disagree with that, and that's totally fine. You know, he's not, I guess, for everyone, but for me, he just like, he hits that mark of what I like in, you know, a song and stuff. I got this CD when I was a teenager. I've had it for forever. The only song that I wish was on here that isn't, and I think it's kind of a crime that it isn't, is Big Joe Mufferaw. But everything else on here is fantastic, and a really good way to sort of get into learning like country music of a certain brand. He once came actually to my hometown, and I remember seeing him play at the arena here in town, and it was great. What a great show. Oh my God. Yeah, Stompin' Tom, fantastic guy. Next up we have Creedence Clearwater Revival's Chronicle. This I think is my dad's CD. We've had this for forever. Fun fact, the Police have actually been called to my house twice when I was a kid because my dad was playing music too loud. One of the times I believe it was this. The other time I think it was Graceland by Paul Simon. But yeah, that was these are albums that have like connections to me in my memory in ways that are fun and fantastic. But yeah, this is everything that you want from Creedence. I mean, I do have Bayou Country somewhere, but for me, it's like this is the best. Like the overview of all of their hits and everything is just a great thing to learn from. Next up, I got Miles Davis's Jack Johnson. This is jazz for rock fans, I guess, basically, because it's very Hendrixian. Is that even a word? Is that even how you would define it? But it's very much like if Jimi Hendrix teamed up with Miles Davis to make a jazz album. I think this is what it would sound like to some extent. It's not perfect, but yeah. Herbie Hancock's on here. I have Headhunters on vinyl, and so from this to that is actually a really fun sort of like back-to-back experience, because you get sort of the more psychedelic rock jazz, and then you get the more funky space jazz, I guess, of Headhunters. So yeah, I like to listen to this. It's just 2 songs. I think it's like 40-ish minutes of music. It's fantastic. Next up we have, because I think it's no secret at this point in time that Zach is a Bob Dylan fan. We have Bob Dylan's Desire, which I also own on vinyl, but I got this on CD so that I can listen to it in the car sometimes when I'm driving around. I really like this album, and I think I've gone into detail about this before, but yeah, this album has unfortunately centered itself in my brain and come out in a lot of the travel that I've done over the past few years, from like tarot cards to Buddhism to even just like the content of the songs have featured heavily in my subconscious over the past few years. So that's a thing that I own. I also own Modern Times by Bob Dylan, because I really like this of his like newer stuff, I guess. I don't have Time Out of Mind, and I don't have the one that's in between, and I will at some point in time pick those up, but Modern Times was in the store last time I was in the store, so I picked it up, and it's great. I really enjoy it. Thunder on the Mountain is fun. Spirit on the Water is great. I also really liked Nitty Moore while listening to it, but yeah, Modern Times is fantastic. I also picked up the Flying Burrito Brothers, the best of the Flying Burrito Brothers. I had a 2 CD set of Flying Burrito Brothers at some point in time that was, I want to say, their first 2 albums. I also had Grievous Angel and GP by Graham Parsons at one point in time, which is how I sort of got into the Flying Burrito Brothers. But this has like everything that I love about it. It also has my favorite Burrito Brothers song in Lazy Days on here. So this is a lot of fun. Kind of the spaced out, cosmic sort of country vibe is how I might try to begin to define it. That might not even be the proper way to do it. But yeah, next up I have the Buddy Holly collection. This is 50 Buddy Holly songs. Great set, great introduction to him. It starts at the very beginning of his recording career and then follows it through to the very end of his recording career. And you get the sense of how he developed as an artist, because like his earlier recordings, like Down the Line and Soft Place in My Heart, come off as very, very like country, and then you get into, as he develops into more of like the rockabilly, I don't even know, like rock and roll sound, and then you get into, at the end of it, as he's starting to change out of that almost, and it's becoming more like what Elvis's movie soundtracks and stuff would sound like. It's beginning to shift into that format as well. So like it's great in that sense that you get the overview of his career, but you also kind of are left wondering like, man, where would he have gone had that plane not crash? Like, where would he have gone with his music? What would it have become based off of where he was going at the very end of it? So this is great. I do have a Buddy Holly vinyl that I think is only like 20 songs or something. So this one is actually my favorite thing to sit down with, because yeah, you get that much wider career retrospective. I also have Jack Johnson's In Between Dreams. I just really like this album personally. I have learned how to play a couple songs off of it, and yeah, I just really enjoy it. It also has a tie-in in a weird way with another CD that I'm going to talk about in a few moments, but that's because of the song, like, Good People. I think it's really just because of Good People more than anything else, but yeah, it has a fun connection to another album, and I always think about the two of them together. Up next, we have Willie Nelson's 16 Biggest Hits. This was one of my dad's CDs that I've borrowed from his collection. He, I think, picked this up on the road while he was driving truck, and this went around with him a bunch of places. It's now followed me a bunch of places. And yeah, like, I like Willie Nelson. I enjoy his music. I like that there's kind of like a jazzier sort of country vibe going on here than there is like a more traditional hardcore sort of country vibe in a lot of these songs. And I think that's really interesting and really cool to bring into the format. I learned how to play Uncloudy Day by ear the other day, so that was like a big like step forward for me. I was like, oh cool, I can kind of figure this stuff out now. And then that led me into learning other stuff by ear as well. So yeah, that's a fantastic album. Next up, we have 3 CDs by Sam Roberts, who are now, I guess, the Sam Roberts Band. But yeah, we got We Were Born in a Flame. Of the 3, this is probably my most favorite. I remember listening to a retrospective about this album when I was driving across the prairies in 2023 in the summer, and it was CBC Music interviewing Sam Roberts about this album and some of like the influences behind it and everything. They left out the song Paranoia. They didn't include that in that song. Did not make the hour-long cut, if I remember listening to it on the radio correctly. But yeah, that was that. This is a fantastic album. I like the mix of like at times it's very sort of like Beatlesy, very like solo Paul McCartney, and then it's also kind of like just general rocky, and like there's like kind of like a little folky vibe going on as well. In things like Hard Road, I would say for sure has more of that folkier vibe. But this is probably my favorite of the 3 CDs that I'm going to show you. I also have Chemical City, which was the follow-up album. I think I got to see him in tour for this album in Ottawa at one point in time in the summer, one of the summers. But yeah, this is also really great. I like the expansion into more of like jam rock to some extent, or at least allowing the songs to breathe more, much like Paranoia. So it's like Paranoia at the end of We Were Born in a Flame kind of leads into the sound that you get off of here, which is more of like them allowing the songs to really stretch out and have more jam sort of parts in them, which is fantastic. Yes, that's a great album. After that, we have Love at the End of the World. This is the 3rd album that they put out, I believe. This also has some really great stuff on it. And this, I think, of the 3 of them, might actually have the biggest influence in how I kind of like play guitar at this point in time. But as I said, of the 3 of them, I think I prefer We Were Born in a Flame the most. But yeah, like, this is, I want to say, like more of a tightening back up from maybe the excess of Chemical City back towards more of the tightness of We Were Born in a Flame. But fantastic album nonetheless. Next up is one that I discovered from playing at some like open mics here over the summer. And that is The Weavers. Somebody showed up one night at one of the open mics that I was at and played a Weavers song or at least a Weaver's version of a song. I was like, oh, I think I've seen that CD somewhere at home. And it turns out it was on the CD shelf. It had never been opened until I, broke the seal on this bad boy. And this was Pete Seeger's sort of like folk super group, if you will, of like the 1950s. It's got a lot of like folk staples on it. It covers a lot of different territory from South African sort of like folk music up into obviously European folk music and then American folk music. So it's got all that stuff. This is a very sort of like, so like a poppy sort of take on folk, which is really interesting. It's like this is like the Elvis like movie soundtrack of folk, if you will. Like it's very polished, it's very palatable. I guess it's very made for like a mass appeal of some kind. And it comes off as almost even like Frank Sinatra folk. Almost like that's what I would describe the Weavers as. It doesn't mean I don't like it or I don't think it's not valuable. It just means it's very poppy, and so like I prefer folk that's a little rawer, a little rougher, a little more like Woody Guthrie, if you will. But the Weavers still cover a lot of that stuff, and of course Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie knew each other, were friends, and all the rest of that stuff. Next up, I have the first two Vampire Weekend CDs, so Vampire Weekend and Contra. I really like both of these CDs. I just like the Vampire Weekend in general. I do have Modern Vampires of the City, Father of the Bride, and the hell is the name of it? What's the most recent one? Only God Was Above Us? Only God Was Above Us. I have all of those on vinyl. But these two on CD are ones that I collected on CD originally, and have just always kept in that format, obviously. Between the two of these, I think I prefer Contra better, as it starts to sort of shift or mature, I guess, in the way that they're sounding. Overall, I think Modern Vampires of the Weekend is my favorite of the stuff that they've released, but yeah, both of those are really great albums and I enjoy them. And then lastly, of the single CD collection that I have Neil Young's Greatest Hits. And this was a CD I got when I was a teenager. Covers the span of his career, at least up to Harvest Moon. And it fills in a lot of the blanks, or some of the blanks that I have in my Neil Young collection, if you will. I had... After the Gold Rush and Harvest were the main two sort of Neil Young albums that I gravitated to. And then I want to say, is it Road Rock 4 that has Hey Hey My My and My My Hey Hey on it? I think it is. I had those three. Those are the main three that I always used as like my Neil Young sort of touchdowns. And then this became a means of like filling in the gaps, if you will. And now it is basically my Neil Young collection, if you will. Great stuff on here. Down by the River, which I remember learning how to play for like the rhythm sort of aspect of it. Heart of Gold, obviously, is another song that I've learned how to play off of here. And then I might sit down and like learn how to play some other stuff by ear. I think I knew how to play Helpless at one point in time. But yeah, as I progress in getting better at different styles of playing guitar, that's something I'll probably gravitate towards more going forward. Next up, I have my CD sets. So these are like special sets that have been put together, collections, if you will, of things. And so let's start with this side. So during the summer, as I got more into Vampire Weekend again, I started to get more into African music again. And so like I've always liked Paul Simon's Graceland, and from that I've liked the Indestructible Beat of Soweto, Volume 1 was a thing that I used to have and really liked. I'd maybe listen to a couple sort of Ladysmith, Black Mambazo solo songs outside of it, but that was sort of my main touchstones for it. And then from that, I used to collect or I used to trade like Ethiopics series CDs with a friend of mine, and I used to also trade like Nigerian rock CDs, like psychedelic rock from Nigeria. And so I was digging through the racks at, I want to say, Sonic Boom in Toronto, and I found this guy. This is Roots Rocking Zimbabwe, and it's fantastic because it covers sort of like all the different main veins of African rock and roll that you can get. There's like Zimbabwe is just north of South Africa, and so during apartheid, a lot of South African artists would go to Zimbabwe in order to be able to play their music live, and so there's a lot of what sounds like Soweto inspired rock and roll on here, but there's also stuff that sounds like very much like that psychedelic, fuzzed out, like kind of funky rock that was coming out of Nigeria. And there's like a couple of songs that kind of have that like Ethiopian rock music, especially like the Ethiopics series, to me sounds very much like a 1950s sort of like Motown kind of R&B vibe that's going on with it. And so there are, I want to say, a couple of songs on here that have that kind of aspect to it, but it's not a heavy influence in Zimbabwe's rock. But yeah, mostly it's the weird mix between like Soweto rock and like Nigerian like psychedelic rock. It's a fantastic CD. I really enjoy it, and it got me into trying to figure out how to play more stuff on just the first 3 strings of the guitar, so like the top 3 strings, as opposed to always focusing on like the bass side of it, focusing more the trebly side of it. After that, we have, this is probably my favorite CD of one of my favorite CDs of all time. This is Bob Dylan's No Direction Home, the soundtrack from the Bootleg series. This is volume 7 in it. I absolutely love this CD. It has alternate versions of a lot of the stuff. It has outtakes and things like that on here. I used to also have the Royal Albert Hall concert, which is where a lot of people think that the Like a Rolling Stone live version that has the Judas remark on it comes from. It wasn't. That was from the Manchester Free Trade Hall show. I used to listen to, I want to say, is it the first 3 volumes of this that have one of the CDs is like all 25 takes of Like a Rolling Stoner on it. And I just think it's really fascinating to hear how those songs develop over time, how they change, how they morph, how they oftentimes fall apart just in the middle of the recording because like somebody misses their timing, or somebody is like or like maybe Bob misses a line as he's like going to sing something, or the words change on the fly and all the rest of it. And it's just fun to hear how those things develop, because again, much like watching the Beatles' Get Back documentary, of them making Get Back, of them making Let It Be, of them making that album, it's like you as a casual fan might not understand how much is going into actually making those songs, how much these people who have dedicated their lives to making and playing music are struggling with creating the end product that you get at the end of the day. And so I think that also takes a lot of the pressure off of you as somebody who might want to learn how to do that yourself, of like, you don't have to be perfect. It's okay that it takes you like 10 or 12 takes to get whatever you want out. There's nothing wrong with that, because even the greats have those issues, right? And so, yeah, anyways, I like this. It has it has one of his earliest recordings on here, When I Got Troubles. And then it has, obviously it follows him on the live versions of a lot of his early folk stuff into when he goes electric. And it's a lot of just alternate takes of his electric stuff. And then, of course, the last 2 songs include members of the Hawks who were backing him up on that tour. So like Robbie Robertson is on there. I want to say Rick Danko and Garth Hudson are also in there. And so it's really fantastic to listen to. I really love that album. Also, what I have is I have this massive 4-volume set of the Ash recordings of Woody Guthrie. Woody Guthrie, probably like the touchstone for American music in general, folk music for sure, maybe country rock to some extent. Has a very Woody Guthrie vibe to it. Also has a very bluesy vibe. We'll get into that in a second. But Woody Guthrie, not much to say about him that hasn't already been said. What a fantastic artist, what a great guy. I like the rawness and the roughness of this. I like the honesty in what he's writing. And I like that, you know, nothing is really above or below him to sort of write about as a song. And so this is almost like 100, this is just over 100 tracks. And the liner notes in this are also fantastic because they go in depth behind each of the songs and stuff. It's a really great set if you're looking for Woody Guthrie, if you're interested in learning about, you know, the breadth of his career, if you will. And it even includes, you know, recordings that he would have done with, I want to say, Cisco Houston, and is Sonny on here as well? I can't remember. He might not be. It might just be Cisco Houston that's on here. But yeah, like, it's just a great set. And you also get to hear alternate versions of some of the songs that he recorded and how he changed them over time. So that's in there. That's fantastic. Now we get into what are kind of like the bargain CDs, I guess, that I bought. These are 3 CD sets. I don't know that they even have like a series name that you would really call them. They're made by a company called Big 3. And they're just 3 CD sets. And so they cover either artists or genres, and they give you 60 songs that, you know, help you to understand either a specific artist or an actual musical styling to some extent if you want. So I got Little Richard. That was the first one that I got because Buddy Holly, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, for me these are sort of the touchstones of early rock and roll sound. And so wanting to learn how to do more of that meant that I wanted to go back and like listen to what these guys were doing to sort of learn from that to move forward. I learned how to play Slippin' and Slidin' by ear one night. I was listening to it and I was like, I think I can play that, or figure out how to play that on guitar instead of on piano. And so I just sat down and kept, you know, banging away at the guitar until I came up with something that to me works as a means of covering it. And so that was a lot of fun. That was one of the first songs that I figured out how to kind of like play by ear. So that was sort of like a step forward for me. But this set, unlike the others, to me is almost a little bit of a letdown because it's Little Richard and the other kings of rock and roll. So it's 2 CDs of Little Richard songs, which is fantastic. Covers his very early stuff that he made. And then there's a 3rd CD that is like other artists. So it's like Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, Gene Vincent is in here, Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, Buddy Holly. They all have like a song each on here. And that to me is slightly less interesting because like I could just get a set focused on them. But this was a really great, for me, means of getting a ton of Little Richard songs and being able to listen to him exclusively as an artist. Add to that, I got a few more sets. So I got Totally Essential Rockabilly. This is fantastic. This is just a mix of a bunch of people. Pretty much everybody from the 3rd disc of Little Richard is on here in some way, shape, or form, plus a few other people. But yeah, they have Billy Lee Riley and the Little Green Men are on here, but I think it's criminal that they didn't include Flying Saucer Rock and Roll. That one did not make it into this set, and that's my favorite Billy Lee Riley song. and that makes me kind of sad that it's not on here, but what can you do? I don't get to pick the music that goes on these things. But otherwise, like, it's a really good set. It's a fantastic set. It covers a lot of the different sort of strains of rockabilly, if you will, and stylings that go into it, or at least early rockabilly. So that was great to pick up. I also got Totally Essential Bluegrass. This is a 3 CD set. This one's actually really fun. It covers some of the stuff from like the 30s, but it's more focused on like the 40s and 50s bluegrass music. So it's not as maybe rough and tumble as I thought it might be. It's a little more polished because of that, which is fine. But there's tons of stuff on here that is like really interesting and gives you a good sense of what bluegrass traditionally sounds like. In fact, one of the songs, Wade Maynard's Little Birdie, is on here. And that was a song that I was listening to, and I was just like, I might be able to play something similar to that. And I did come up with something similar to it, but is also like radically different. So yeah, that's a lot of fun to have sat down and messed around with. But yeah, like there's Uncle Dave Macon is on here. He's probably one of the older artists that are included in here, because he was recording in like the 20s and 30s and stuff. I do have some of his songs on vinyl. What else is it? Blue Sky Boys are fairly old as well. So yeah, at some point in time I'll probably get more into like trying to find something that has more of like the 20s and 30s sort of bluegrass on it, but the 40s and 50s that are covered there are good as an introduction to the format. I also got 2 separate sets of blues music. So this is the other main influence for like rock and roll, right? Like blues to Chuck Berry to Elvis Presley to, you know, Bob Dylan, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, to like today's rock and roll is just like a straight line essentially. This was a really good set in comparison to the other one that I got, because this is focused just on that like 20s, 30s, early 40s blues music. So there's pretty much everybody that you could possibly want is on here. Charlie Patton, Son House, Skip James, Robert Johnson, the Mississippi Shakes are on here. Unfortunately, there is not, I mean, I guess that's why, because it's the Delta Blues. There's Mississippi John Hurt is on here. Arthur Crudup is on here. Muddy Waters is on here before he gets really electrified, is on here. And so it's a really good scope of that. And I was just thinking, I was like, it's kind of criminal that somebody like Blind Willie Johnson isn't on here. But that's because this is the Delta Blues, and there's a separate set that covers Texas blues, which I'm gonna try to keep an eye out for at some point in time, because yeah, Blind Willie Johnson was from Texas, which is just the next state over. It's over here. It's the next state over from the Delta region, and then there's stuff like Piedmont blues, which I guess is more like Eastern Seaboard in its origins and stuff. So there's different variations and strains of it that just focuses solely on the Delta region, which is cool. Next up is just this one. It's called The Blues, and this CD set covers a bit of like the early, it gets into like city blues, which is almost like jazz. So like Bessie Smith is on here, Mamie Smith, Ma Rainey. So that's like the early 1920s are included on here, and then it goes straight through to the 1960s, where it stops with Howlin' Wolf and Junior Wells and stuff, and Muddy Waters after he gets electrified. Slim Harpo is on here. I love Slim Harpo. I love his voice. I think it's fantastic. Otis Rush is included on here, which is really fantastic. and like BB King. So yeah, the first CD is more of that like acoustic sort of blues, and then the second and third CDs are more of your electrified blues. But it is cool because it does have Mamie Smith, Bessie Smith, Ma Rainey on here, who are definitely more of almost like a city blues because it's kind of jazzier. They're playing more with like a piano and stuff like that, and it separates it out from like the country sort of blues that you get with like the Delta blues or Texas blues or Piedmont blues and all the rest of that. But yeah, once it gets into sort of like the electrified blues, it's kind of cool. And it's just, yeah, it's neat to listen to it change over time. But yeah, that's one that I'll definitely probably sit down with more at some point in time too. After that, we have two bands that I got box sets of. These are box sets that either I had previously or I've had for a very long time. So the first one that I'm going to show you is Nirvana's With the Lights Out. This is my favorite Nirvana set. I guess my favorite album would have to be MTV Live Unplugged because I like the covers that they pulled out. I love the way that they, orchestrated a lot of the songs that they put on that album as well. But this is great because it really goes into like the behind the scenes of Nirvana. This is fantastic because it has a bunch of like home demos and stuff that Kurt recorded. It has live stuff that they recorded. Hilariously, it starts off with a live version of Heartbreaker, which Kurt kind of like falls apart in the middle of playing because I don't think he wanted to play it, which is hilarious. And then it goes through sort of the rest of their career. It includes like a little a glimpse into their fascination with Ledbetter, Huddy Ledbetter, also known as Leadbelly. And so that kind of explains how you get Where Did You Sleep Last Night as the last song on MTV Plugged in New York. And like those are recordings that they made in 1989. So it's not like that was like a recent sort of fascination of theirs. That had been part of the band for at least 5 years. 4 or 5 years as they get towards that album. So that's kind of cool to hear that come out. A lot of the other live versions are really interesting, but for me, what always has stood out to me from this album are the like home demos that all of the home demos that Kurt made of just himself, generally with just like an acoustic guitar, playing at home, singing into a very scratchy, tape recorder, and just putting down these ideas that, he's going to take into the band at some point in time to then flesh out as like the full song. And so like, You're Right, the home demo is really cool to listen to, and then listen to the actual released version of You're Right, because he changes like the repetitive, chorus word that he uses in the song between both versions. The demo sounds really raw, very almost like tortured to some extent, but it's fantastic. Like when I first heard this, I was like, that's actually the quality of music that I kind of aspire to make, which is sometimes really bad and sometimes really good, but like I like that sort of home demo-y sound of him just sitting down with his guitar and playing into whatever recording device is available around him to get an idea down of what he wants the final song to sound like. And so that for me is just a really great CD set and something that has influenced me in the sense of how I record stuff, which is very incredibly lo-fi, and oftentimes a lot of fun for me, maybe not the best quality for somebody else to listen to, but that's fine. I'm not charging you anything to listen to it. You don't even have to listen to it if you don't want to. It's fine. But yeah, the last CD set that I have at this point in time is the Tragically Hip's Hippopotamus. And this is the 2 CD set of Your Favorites, which is like their greatest hits. Was it 40, almost 40 songs, 38 songs, or 37 songs, sorry, 37, of their, greatest hits up to the point that this album was released. And then it includes 2 DVDs, one that has the music videos that they made for their songs, and the other that is the full-length That Night in Toronto concert of them playing live in Toronto at one of their many concerts. But what's really cool is to flip through this thing and to see like the handwritten sort of notes that eventually become some of the songs that you hear on this album. So you kind of get a little insight into almost like Gord's approach to writing, approach to, taking stuff that he wrote down at some point in time and then fleshing it out into a fuller song from just flipping through these pages and listening to the CD. So I'm just trying to see if there's a page in here that actually, I think it's in here, but it might not be. But it's come up on like a couple of the actual albums that they've released recently, like Saskadelphia, I got on vinyl, and the liner notes for it are like the handwritten lyrics that Gord probably used to record the songs with. And so that's actually really fun to flip through and to understand and all the rest of it. Yeah, I guess this page kind of makes sense, but it's got like the beginnings of what becomes like Last Night I Dreamed You Didn't Love Me on it. But yeah, it's just really cool to like flip through and kind of understand these things, or at least see like where stuff started from. But that is my current CD collection at this point in time. As I said, I need to get a new CD rack to store some of these things on, because the little like 10 slot CD rack that I have is unable to hold all of it at this moment in time. So that's what I have. I think going forward, I might spend more time trying to find more of like these sort of sets, or even like more of like a retrospective box set of somebody that I'm interested in learning more about, than I am in buying, say, like a single album. Because to me, as somebody who's learning to play music, to learn new styles, and to get more educated about those styles and stuff, it makes more sense to get something like this, or like a single career retrospective, than maybe just like a specific album by someone. But obviously we'll see where that goes at some point in time. I'm doing my best to not go too crazy into this at this moment, but best laid plans and all. Anyways, take care out there.